Hello, everybody. Warm welcome to all of you. We're really sorry for a couple of minutes delay. I hope the screen is visible to all of you. So I'll just get
Yes.
started. Uh, a lovely evening to all of you again. Thank you for being here as we start our webinar on mapping mindset shifts in India. Specifically, we'll be touching upon the topic of behavioral patterns in buying precious metals and jewelry. I am Purnima Santanam, the Insights lead here at Vision Next. Joining me are my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Shalini Sood Segal, who's the Director Creative at Vision Next, and we have Dr. Kaustav Sengupta, who's the Director Insights at Vision Next. We have Harini Srinivas, who's the Content Manager here at Vision Next, and Dashna Karthikeyan, who's our Transporting Assistant. So we'll go right ahead. Okay. Before we go right in, I just want to give a quick overview about VisionX and what we do. VisionX is a trend insight and forecasting initiative under NIFT. We use a combination of artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence to map the changing mindsets in India. Our deep vision model has 2 lakh plus primary and secondary data, and we have about 800 plus trained transporters all across the country to share the data with us. And we've come to publish over 60 plus micro trend reports, over 6 closer to season trend reports, and 3 research papers. We are also proud to let you know that we have been an inside partner at TFI in 2022, India Fashion Forum in 2023, and Bharat Techs in 2024. Here's a quick bird's eye view of our process. As you can see, our data comes through our trained transporters and also other social media platforms. These data are further processed using our deep vision model, and our team, along with other industry specialists, sit together and we go through the data to analyze, and we generate reports in the form of trend reports, trend closer to season trend reports, trend bites, mindset reports, and other assets that are available for the industry to consume. So before we go ahead, our main question is, why are we doing this topic at this time? What is the importance of studying the behavioral changes when it comes to consuming, say, metal and precious, metals like gold? So more than half the population in India is constituted by millennials and Gen Z, which is more than what the world population of Gen Z and millennials are, which is about 47%. And 65% of Gen Z say that work is an important driver of identity, which tells that that population has started working and they will be an important workforce, making sure that they will be buying a lot of things. They're investing as well. 30% plus company CEOs are right now under 50, which tells that the workforce is very young. The leaders are very, very young. So we also see that investing mindset for Gen Z is called smart risk takers. That's how we describe them, because they are rewriting the rules of smart investing with their impressive blend of risk awareness and early financial prudence. They also seem to be parking their money in safe options like FDs and gold to keep their portfolios balanced. Where technology meets traditional, a new mindset is emerging, and my colleagues are here to take you through the insights. In this webinar, we have a small insight into our cultural context, where in India, how gold has evolved, and a deep dive insights into our focus groups and how we have gathered data to establish this. And we also have 3 key emerging mindsets, which also Dashna and Harini will be covering on the narratives, the brand references, and also products. In the end, we have a special feature by our principal investigators, Dr. Shalini and Dr. Kaustav, talking about why so gold and also the key mindsets. So I will hand it over to Harini. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Purnima, for that lovely introduction. A very good evening to all attendees present. When we talk about Sone Ki Chidiya, we'd first of all like to underline that Do Sone Ki Chidiya quite literally means a bird made of gold or the Anna Pakshi. What we are still highlighting here is gold as a mindset that was prevalent because India was a land of abundance, was a land of a lot of resources. It was one of the primary exporters of textiles, silk, spices, and of course, gold. And when we look at gold, this metal is fundamentally associated with um, the human aspect of desire, which is very evident in our Itihasa, primarily in the Ramayana, where we see the whole backdrop of Sita's kidnapping. That is something that happens after she follows or after she's lured in by a golden deer. Similarly, in our ancient texts, there is the mention of the word swarna, which means the best, also translating to gold, yellow like, or the sun. And to further highlight the emphasis of gold in our tradition, we have the Arthashastra, which refers to metallurgy, and it was written in the 4th century BCE. And further, we go on to coinage. Even though we don't use gold right now as a form of currency in exchange, it still remains prevalent in the form of, let's say, the kasamalai, very literally translating to a chain of coins. And that's prevalent in Tamil culture specifically, and gold still remains pivotal as a social exchange symbol and as something that is often of a ritualistic import. And to go to the other end of the spectrum, we've also included an image of the Buddha because he symbolizes opulence as a form of renunciation. So when we look at the motif of the earlobe or the stretched earlobe, we see that Buddha once had a lot of opulence, once had a lot of jewelry that he could wear, and which is why his earlobe is stretched out. And at this point, he chooses or he has actively renounced wearing something that is exuding luxury. Going into our pop culture references. In the right here, we have Love, Death, and Robots, a Netflix anthology. And this specific anthology, this episode is called Jibaro, which is based on a siren like entity who's clad in gold and who is a symbol of someone who attracts others with greed. And similarly, when we move to Crew, the movie again is based on the fundamental aspects of desire and greed. And speaking about something that is a lot more time relevant and something that was liked very much by the Indian populace, it was Avesham, where we see how gold, rather color in the terms of white and gold and silver and black is a key element in how they show a narrative development and character arc throughout the story, where initially the protagonist is someone who exudes a lot of charisma, who is supposed to be someone of prestige, and how towards the end he becomes someone who wants to be one among the people and who wants to become someone who's a lot more humble.
Hi, everybody. This is Darshana Karthikeyan, Trend Spotting Coordinator at Vision Next. Based on our deep dive insights on gold buying habits among young millennials and Gen Z, 94% of them have voted gold to be a very strong and solid asset to invest in. Also, when asked about how they purchase their gold, given that gold can now be purchased through digital platforms and apps like Google Pay and Paytm, majority still chose jewelry. So this shows how jewelry is still the most popular form of investment. So we also picked out a few statements from our discussions and I'll quickly highlight them. Gen Z chose jewelry and gold as the safest and powerful asset to have. And now that Gen Z is slowly moving into the workspace and making their own money, they consider gold as a solid investment. They also prefer to drop their penny on contemporary designs and digital gold coins.
So, moving further, when we talk about gold as Gen Z's bestie, what we're essentially trying to convey is the user experience and the whole perception of consumption around gold. So, for instance, there's this really interesting article that suggests that gold is now available in vending machines from convenience stores. And what this essentially implies is that the whole consumption perception of gold is likened to the consumption perception of a soda can. So you want the same level of accessibility when it comes to gold. And it's really interesting how we can envision this in a scenario where, let's say, someone is coming back home late from work and it's their anniversary and they've completely forgotten about it. And on their way, they just spot a vending machine and they just, on that very spot, they pick out a gift for their significant other and they can go back home. So this was just one instant. Moving further. So these are the three broad mindsets that we will be talking about. And in talking about them, we will elaborate in terms of a narrative, in terms of signals, and in terms of brand references. So our first story is primarily centered around the revival of traditional motifs with a hint of modernity and wearability. So when we say this, I talk about the mindset of a modern sentinel. This is someone who wants to preserve culture, who's extremely rooted in tradition, at the same time wishes to make it very relevant to the time they are in. So when we look at the brands or when we look at examples here, the Heartful, for instance, was a piece of jewelry that was very prominent in the Mughal era and was a product of Persian and Mughal confluence, which manifested here in Asia. Now we see brands bringing them back, and in bringing them back, they are reviving them with more modern elements. Similarly, the armlet was a piece that was primarily constructed of metal, but now when we see its revival, the motifs are a bit modern. The construction involves mixed media, as in the incorporation of textiles, and as opposed to making it completely of metal, which would be very heavy and constricting movement, now the ornament is just plated in metal. So this shows how drastically we have changed in our perception of consumption, and this primarily highlights a revival of material culture being the first subset of this mindset. The second subset is a revival of narrative culture, wherein there are aspects within our inherent Indianness that are re-looked at. For instance, when we talk about the Mukuti, which translates to the nose pin, here this particular Mukuti is inspired from a konde or an amboda, which is a bun encircled with a garland of flowers. And it's interesting how a bun encircled with a garland of flowers is a completely different part of the body. It's a completely different aspect or a completely different symbol, which is now interpreted in a very different way as a nose. Similarly, spices is something India is really, really known for. And when we talk about spices, it's interesting how the aspect of Indian cuisine is something that is entering jewelry when it is translated in terms of charms that can be worn with pendants, that can be worn as accents in our bracelets, or that can be worn in our earrings. So, this is the second part of revival of narrative culture, where we see a shift in how a symbolism in some other aspect is now revived. For example, cuisine is now revived in the form of jewelry.
So identity is an important factor for Gen Z, and now they're doing the same with gold. Let me introduce our second mindset, the bold conversationalist. So the bold conversationalist is someone who lets their jewelry do the talking. So here, Gen Z makes sure the jewelry is experimental and contemporary. Gen Z now want to show their identity through jewelry. It's not just limited to your regular accessories. They now have picked up gold and in a very non-traditional way. They're trying to move from the traditional aspect of gold jewelry and reintroduce the same through contemporary pieces like sunglasses and nail caps. The next sub-story is a little bit more unconventional and is one of the most biggest Gen Z trends, the year stacks. Gen Z has coined a very fun term for this, calling it a year party or real estate, where they adorn their ear with multiple piercings and stack them with beautiful ornaments. Gold has now even moved to intimate and more intricate places like teeth. They are now sporting 18 karat gold gems and jewels on their teeth. We've also seen our grandparents sport these beautiful gold and silver nail crowns and caps. Gen Z has picked this trend up and they call it grills. So these grills are mostly made with sterling silver and gold and are decked with diamonds. So now, even in form, Gen Z is showing non-conformity and they're moving away from the unconventional zone. So now the pieces showcased here are made by small businesses like Nenikar and Garden of Ether, and you can see how these are mainly targeted towards the younger Gen Z. So this shows a serious mindset shift that Gen Z is willing to accept gold in different forms and shapes.
So now this is a really interesting sub-story within the mindset because it emphasizes on type and script and how they can be very cheeky. At the same time, we've commonly seen a lot of lettering or monograms prevalent in pendants, but to see them also emerge in the form of earrings is something new and something different that we've spotted. And it's also very proclamatory in terms of identity. Moving further, so this also shows a market shift in the user experience and perception of products that exude luxury, particularly when we talk about the softness of identity, which is highlighted in our next mindset. So everyday Lux basically talks about a soft, dainty, sophisticated, a very subdued identity that is portrayed in how gold is consumed or gold is worn. This particular story emphasizes on silence is gold, which is evident through the references that we've taken. For instance, Mia by Tanishq, this particular example highlights how the ear studs that generally have a screw mechanism are now being shifted to a rubber mechanism, which makes wearing them a lot more easier. We still see ear stacks here, but they're a lot more subdued, they're a lot more sophisticated, they're a lot more dainty, they're a lot more wearable, and we also see this interesting pendant from Quartzsmith Jewellery, which is basically supposed to be a symbol of the zodiac sign Virgo. Now, upon inquiry, upon looking at it up close, we understand the intricacy of a pendant like this, but from afar, it just looks like something very simple and something very minimalistic. So, this story basically talks about pieces of identity that are very subdued and worn close to you for yourself and that are not as loud or as bold as the previous stories. Moving forward.
Yeah, so next subset builds on the same clean girl trend and soft coquette trends. Gold has now found itself in accessories like hair bows and clips and is also being seen in delicate and dainty forms like charms and minimal rings.
So, this interesting example from Flying Fish, which we found very specifically under the workwear section in their page, suggests that though pins or safety pins are something that you hide, when you redesign them, revamp them, or understand them from a different perspective, they are not something that are meant to be entirely hidden. So this is a really interesting shift that we see in revamping a very minimalistic aspect of something that we wear, something that is very utilitarian, into something that is aesthetic as well as utilitarian, yet very minimal in its approach. So now we would like to have Dr. Shalini Sood Sehgal and Dr. Kaustubh Sen Gupta have a discussion and highlight a bit more on the mindsets of why so gold.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the charm of gold, as we can see and our team has discussed with you, is somewhere inexplicably embedded in our Indian history and culture. And the first evidences of it came out way back in 5,000 years back in Indus Valley civilization. So let's understand the very metal gold as a material, the kind of physical properties it has. It appears in its pure form. It doesn't need to be refined. It doesn't tarnish easily. and it's shiny and easily malleable. So early on, intuitively, human race attributed a larger value to it somehow, more than other metals that were prevalent around. And the whole idea of this value is what we are discussing today, vis-a-vis over a period of time as how it has grown. We know that gold is somewhere connected with the way our life evolves in this country from the time we are born. And gold forms a very, very significant part in every phase and every stage of life, and especially somewhere, I mean, it is not with regards to gender, but definitely in a woman's life it does. So when a child is born, immediately if a gold you know offering is given to them, then immediately it is considered as auspicious, whether it is from the first piercing you get, from the first or the from coming of age. Every bit of it is linked to the whole idea of gold in it. Even fixing of marriage, or if a bride comes, comes to your house, she's gifted gold as a mark of blessing her abundance in life. And when the gold is sort of it exists in the family, is considered as an heirloom. An heirloom expected to be passed on from mother to daughter or daughter-in-law, and the whole cycle continues. So what I'm trying to say is that in this whole idea, gold is thus considered a legacy. It is something that we have, and we will sort of move on and carry it forth. This also brings me to another point. I'm going to take to certain references here because how gold is viewed or has been viewed over a period of time, and therefore its associations, before I bring it down to the point where we move into what is today and therefore what can be. The whole idea of gold and divinity, the moment we realize that gold intrinsically has a larger value by humankind at the early point, gold started being equated with gods and therefore immortality. So the whole idea, I mean, there are enough mythological stories that we know of. The whole idea of golden city of Jinnapura. Hiranya means gold, and therefore the whole element of Rigveda talks about gold. Now there is one aspect of the whole association of gold with the immortal, which we also see various shrines are kind of made out of gold. But there is an intrinsic value here. One was an extrinsic value where showing gold was that of wealth, status, of everything. But intrinsically, gold was also mentioned in Ayurveda as an important component of various medicinal things. So gold therefore also exemplified, longevity of life, of youthfulness. So therefore, look at how even medicines today are using it, or for that matter, we have a whole lot of luxury line of creams, lotions that uses gold and nanoparticles of gold as an element to convince us of anti-aging, regenerative qualities, and many other qualities that gold possesses. So the association of gold with immortality was not just for the gods, but immortality for the human mind to believe in themselves as well. And another aspect of it was gold with the whole idea of spirituality, with their wearing gold ornaments meant having a very strong positive connection to life. So we saw in the kind of visuals that were presented to you that having armlets or talisman, kind of on your body meant providing healing, purity, protection. So the whole idea of gold being connected with the idea of good health. And then the whole once the metal was there, then how do you formulate or mold that metal? And India is a very good representative because so deep rooted is this cultural diversity that it seeks gold as a focal point to attain wealth and prosperity and therefore mold gold into different, so differently that each region creates its own design language and therefore identity. And identity, we have seen whether it's filigree of Orissa or temple jewelry of Tamil Nadu, and how our team just represented something like a bold conversationalist or a silence in gold, in terms of a concept, how today we are, the youth is actually kind of looking at molding that same metal into a product. And finally, the last point I want to sort of make out here is that gold, let's not forget, gave us the concept of money way back into history, because till then, I mean, gold was there as a metal, but the concept of it having a certain value, money, what does money mean? It's portable, it's private, and it's permanent. So there was this whole idea of a context which meant that having gold could, there were no mutual bonds at that time, but gold was considered as an important constituent that kind of allowed you to have a certain agency which said this is therefore safe and therefore this can be traded into anything that you want to. So our team showed you examples of Gupta dynasty. We know about it. So it simply wasn't a currency, but it was, or a currency for exchange, but it became symbolic for a currency of power, status, and opulence. And therefore, the culture code for gold became security, became a barometer of what we would consider as a safety net around us. So, having said all that, I just wanted to say that this is what it was. And the value we attribute to gold may change at different phases of life through different stages of life. What it may mean to a Gen X is different from what it may mean to a millennial and what it may mean to a Gen Z. And the question is, we have shown you some of the directions here. My question is, how would Gen Z react to it? Will it react to it as a legacy that they want to carry forward? Would they react to it as an identity which they want to project? Or would they consider it as still as a security, which previous history has shown gold has still been considered? And what manner will it get experienced? In what manner will it get transacted? It's an interesting, is what we are sort of evolving here and discussing here in our journey of gold. Over to you, Costa.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting mindset what we are discussing, and Dr. Shalini has touched the history. We also saw the kind of emerging mindsets what's happening, but let me touch upon the context of youth and gold. Overall, if you see, very interesting, there are a lot of myths happening around youth. I mean, it's been happening for long that youth don't invest. So they are the one who are more spenders rather than keepers. I mean, that's the way we present the younger generations, younger people. But let me share some interesting data. One data very interestingly says that, it's a CAMS data, it says that a stunning 54% of mutual fund investors, the first time mutual fund investors, are Gen Zs. Right? So when we talk about it, 54% is not a very small number, right? When it comes to investing into something which is still pretty risky, mutual fund. And you see that the first few slides, our team showed that gold is actually considered as an investment tool, still for Gen Z. And just to tell you, whatever data you are seeing on the screen, including the designs, are from India and for India. It's not a global imagery. We are talking about Indian youth, and investment is owed to the Indian youth, especially them who's recently gaining money. So we call them a concept. I have a theory called the adapted differentiation theory, where psychographic wants to differentiate themselves from the other psychographic. In India, we have three types of psychographics. We call them as Bharatiyas, I call them as Anglo-Indians, and there's a group called Indians. You can find it in my blog. So it says that all of these psychographics wants to differentiate from each other And one of the main differentiator is how much one can keep and one can show off. Showing off luxury is a way of showing off things for them who's a first generation rich or a second generation rich. And you can see in our country, the layers of richness is changing every century, every decade. And the second generation riches are there in the most of the sector one cities, where the consumption of gold is increasing in different formats, what's being shown here. You must be thinking, why gold? Why not other things? But believe me, a country's value is also judged on the basis of a gold. It's not basis on the diamonds or silver. So gold is something which is considered as unanimously, it's considered as a big and best investment even till date. If you just go through the history of Harappa, and then Shalini was talking about it, and just to inform you, the golds found in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were actually not from Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. These golds were sourced from a place called Kolar. Now the Kolar is pretty far from Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. We don't know how these golds reached into Harappa and Mohenjo-daro zones, which are majorly towards Gujarat and other areas. Kolar is in Karnataka. So there must be a demand of gold for long. So the gold moves from one place to other place. Thus, the mix of the silver actually denoted from where that gold came from in Harappas. So the journey of gold has not changed yet. Even for this generation, the journey remains same. The statements, the way of presentation, the way of utility might change, but the acquiring of gold still remains as a broader mindset. And we say that it's not just about gold, it's about all those things that glitters. So we'll move to our archetypes. Maybe the team can take over. We can talk about our key archetypes, team.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So we would like to sum up the entire mindset, the three mindsets that we covered in the presentation with the three fundamental archetypes that we put on this particular scale, wherein we talk about the range from traditional to experimental on one axis, and we talk about the range from loud to quiet on the other. The bold conversationalist essentially is someone who is very experimental and very loud in how they portray themselves through their jewelry. The modern sentinel, however, is someone who exists as a bridge between traditional and experimental. And however, they still are inclining towards a much more louder expression of their allegiances towards culture, even though they are a lot more subdued as compared to the bold conversationalist. And finally, when we come to everyday Luxe, we see it's very contemporary, it's very experimental, at the same time, it's very quiet. So we had a very interesting conversation going on between how a bold conversationalist essentially could be someone who has recently acquired wealth and who wants to show off their wealth. And probably the everyday Luxe is someone who comes from a family of wealth, who doesn't want to overwhelmingly project their wealth. So here we see the uprising of a bourgeois mindset, and the mindset where gold as a mindset that is something that runs within the family, and it's something that is subtle in how it manifests. So we see an equal and opposite tangent of sorts that is developing. So I hope you found the